So Sloane, you actually did what we think is the third talk at Google ever.
Oh, really?
About
you like carbon dated?
We carbon dated it. It was 2018 or 2008. Mm-hmm. So it was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
What did you think of going to California and doing that first talk? And what's changed? What's different?
It was on the Mountain View campus. There were no, there's a very fancy clock in front of us. There's a lot of the tech is more sophisticated, which you'd think even in 2008 for Google it would have been. I feel like, I just sat down and started trashing my hosts. No, but it was great actually, because I came from a corporate world where I worked for Random House, which is very much not too far from what you see of like publishing portrayals in the movies of sort of dusty old desks and like piles of petrified rubber bands and manuscripts, and to go to this place where it felt like the giant world in Super Mario Brothers. It was just incredible, and there was so much free water of not that what, but like different kinds of flavors of water. But yeah, it was a really nice audience, and it was just like it was a long time ago, but it was sunny.
And you were still working in corporate America at that time?
I was still working. Yeah, maybe that's why I was over impressed by the that's what I noticed more than the experience of the reading was sort of like all the like different sort of trappings were so much more trapping-y than at Random House.
Fair enough. We do have good trappings.
Yes, you do.
When you started, you've done a lot of journalism. Did you intend to become a memoir and short story writer? Was that always sort of where you thought your roots really lied? You've obviously done novels, but you keep coming back to this format.
I think when I started I always wanted to write fiction, and then I sort of. I often say that I fell backwards into nonfiction, which I should really stop saying because it sounds very like, oh, this old thing, like, like it requires effort. But it is a format I sort of gravitate towards because it's close to how I see the world. I think heavily in analogies. But I don't think of it as a memoir. It's not really. I think of them as sort of. Humor pieces or essays, and not really stories about myself, even though they, of course, are.
And what's it like now, a year later, the book's been out for a year, what's it like promoting the paperback as opposed to the hardcover and having lived with it for a year? What's it like the second?
Lightweight.
What's it like the second time around?
It is a little, I guess, are you driving? Is it like play free bird? You're sort of sick of it? No, it's actually great because the thing is in between I have been working on other things. I do a little bit of journalism, travel writing, as well as a novel I'm working on now. So it's actually great to remember that I can do this can be done, it can be bound and sold, and it will happen again because no matter how successful you get, I think part of the health of that is forgetting that anyone would want to read something and having to prove yourself again. So it is a nice little, like, almost lily pad to land on and think, oh, that's right, I did do this.
I remember these stories. So I really love female humorists, and we just talked about the fact that you inject a lot of humor into these essays. And a lot of the books that you see sort of on shelves that are female humor driven are the Tina Feys and Amy Poehler's of the world, people who are entertainers first. What's it like approaching it as a writer first? And then would you ever think to say, well, I'm actually going to dive into their world and do a little bit more entertainment because...
I try to entertain the people, but yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I think it's almost not really an artistic distinction to me, but a marketing distinction, where they have a platform or whatever it is ahead of time that people are going to buy their books. And the people you mentioned also happen to be fantastic writers, but there are other people who aren't as strong. Right. But, it seems to be this sort of trendy thing to whip up a book of essays. And to that, I would just say it's harder than it looks. And similarly, I'm sure being an entertainer or being a stand-up comedian is a lot harder than it looks, or maybe exactly as hard as it looks. It looks hard. But I feel like I don't really feel compelled to sort of dip my toe into that world that much. And I'm very happy with where I come from, which is a tradition that's sort of more influenced by Nora Ephron, Joseph Mitchell, Dorothy Parker, that kind of thing.
That's awesome. So who else is an influence to you, and what else are you sort of reading these days?
Well, I just finished it. So I always read these like dark, terrible things. And it's funny, if you ask like David Sedaris, he'll say the same thing. He's like always reading about like the Holocaust and taxidermy, you know. It's very weird. Not together. Oh my God, that's a horrible joke. But I guess what I'm saying is like I just finished reading Giving Up the Ghost, which is a memoir by Hilary Mantel, who wrote Wolf Hall. And it's fantastic, but very dark. And I tend to read that kind of stuff. But in terms of who I look to, often it'll be short story writers. I think that, like, you know, we have this concept that obviously for narrative nonfiction, we want to keep it pure and you want to tell the truth. And of course that is true, but the techniques you use to tell these stories are not so far off from fiction techniques. You know, there's only so many ways to say, you know, she sat in the chair, right? That's going to look the same, whether you're making it up or telling the truth. Yeah. And so I do tend to look towards, I love Lori Moore as a favorite, an idol of mine. And then, I don't know, I mean, all of them?
All of them.
All of them a good answer? Okay, go ahead.
Lori Moore is a good answer.
Okay.
So we'll let that. How do you think you've changed, your writing's changed since the first 2 collections of stories? What's evolved for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I hope that there's been an evolution, you know, but in a way it's almost, I'm not really in a position to see it. It's almost not mine to answer in a weird way, because it's the same thing as like, you know, you get a haircut and someone hasn't seen you in a while and you're like, I guess this is, or, you know, I guess I have gained or lost weight, or I'm tall, I'm not taller, but that would be weird. But, you know, so I don't see it at these sort of like giant shifts the way it might look from the outside, but I will say it's probably a similar tone that I've always had, just probably focused on slightly more complex topics, just to keep myself interested.
Fair enough. You have to keep yourself interested,
you
right?
Entertain yourself. No, it's true. I feel like I will sometimes pull out a random page, and the worst thing you can do as a writer, this is like a horrible tip, and it's really masochistic, but I pull out a page of a manuscript or a chapter, and I imagine the smartest person I know who doesn't like me reading it. And if I could sort of imagine that person laughing or appreciating it anyway, then I'm like, okay, it's good.
That's a good technique.
Yeah, it's awful in the moment to imagine that, but
do you
it does
know these
work.
People who don't like you?
I mean, I can guess. We live in the world, you know, I don't know.
I can't imagine that many people who don't like you.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
How do you determine, I mean, I'm sure part of it is with these story collections, or it's a matter of time, right? And you're collecting them over time.
Right.
But how do you decide what makes the cut, and how do you decide what the thread is between these stories, and what ends up on the chopping block, and do they get saved for later, or do they get tossed away?
They get repurposed, yeah. It's like the Inuit. Do I use like every part of the whale?
Yeah.
So I can make a candle out of this bone someday. Yeah, I think, you know, not most essays, there's very few essays I've ever written that were written for one of these books. And I work a little differently than other essayists who tend to publish long format stuff in magazines and then collect them. Most of the stuff I publish on the regular doesn't go into the books. The stuff is written for the books. So therefore, very little is getting cut because it was always meant to go, you know, where it goes. The stuff that gets cut is when I feel that I'm just complaining, which is a real danger of first person.
It
you
is.
know, like I once wrote you know, I mean, this is years ago, but in probably back when I was like, you know, fresh from Mountain View, I wrote, you know, an essay about getting a parking ticket. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, who cares? Nobody is the answer. You know, and if there's not that universality, if there's not some sort of like tentacle that's reaching out to other people's experience, then it's sort of a dud. So that stuff, generally I'll save like a funny line and then everything goes.
We've all gotten parking tickets.
I mean, yeah, but nobody cares about your parking ticket either, you know, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. But no, seriously, unless it was something about, you know, you can imagine it being about some sort of larger frustrating experience, or like something about living in an urban center. Or I'm just trying to think of something that would expand that at all, to it not just being like, woe is me.
What do you like to complain about? Like, what are your pet peeves?
Everything.
I know we just talked about parades really briefly.
I'm very
I also hate.
I hate parades.
I hate parades.
Everyone, yeah. No one likes a parade. But I feel like I always describe it as sort of like I walk through the world with like one eye open and one eye kind of cocked. And like if I go on vacation, like I was recently in Mexico City, and like very adamant that like the people I was with, I'm like, let's fling ourselves down, like, you know, within reason. Like I don't want to, you know, do anything too dangerous, but like let's go as much off the beaten path as we can and fling ourselves down a dark alley. And we did. And we found several dark alleys that were good for flinging. And then I just complained the entire time. So it's like basically, I want to do this, and then I want to be miserable while I do it, and that's where I find my happiness. And that's like really what.
And then you go home and you write down all the details.
And then I go home and write down. Yeah, and I think that is the tone that is like the most pervasive in the books. Is that it's actually they're kind of upbeat, but sort of snarky at the same time.
What were you doing in this alley in Mexico City?
Not important.
Okay. So to that end, and to like talking about Mexico, or you went and you scaled a volcano, you did all sorts of things in this book. So my question is, you sort of look for these adventures knowing, hey, this is going to make a good story. Do you just sort of live your life? Like, how do these things, I mean, you complained about a neighbor who was really loud. That wasn't something you probably sought out. But some of these adventures, how does your mind work in terms of being like, you have to be collecting interesting stories, getting a parking ticket, you said did not make the cut. So it can't just be things that are super mundane.
I'm not really collecting them that much. Like, I don't go through with like this sort of new kind of sensor on my head because I do this for a living. I think it would make me a huge pain, honestly, to be around if I just was doing things for the sake of the piece. I mean, it does happen sometimes, but usually it's like halfway through an experience, there'll be some sort of moment that throws something into a kind of sharp relief. I mean, one of the first essays I ever wrote, and it's in the first book, where I got locked out of 2 different apartments in the same day. I was moving apartments, and the same locksmith came to bail me out 8 hours later because it was the same neighborhood. And I had this doormat that said "Deja Vu" frontwards and backwards. And he's filling out the slip, and he pointed with his pen. He goes, "That's a funny doormat." And I just knew, I was like, okay, like this is now congealed in some kind of way. So usually it happens like that. But yes, I would obviously rather not have thrown up on a glacier. Which is what happens.
You want to tell everyone a little bit about?
It'd be great if I didn't. No, I'm kidding. No, I basically, a friend of mine, I was going for a piece to Quito, Ecuador, and I had some extra time, and I was like, what should I do? And I, tried to sort of crowdsource through, Facebook at the time. And, someone recommended a museum, someone recommended a sort of fun bar with good drinks, and someone said, oh, you should climb Cotopaxi. And I could not be bothered to Google it. Burn me. And if I had, I definitely wouldn't have gone. It's huge. It's just not like K2, but it's massive. Yeah. There's snow on top, a lot.
Did you learn a lesson? Like, would you Google it next time? Like, if somebody recommended something?
Yeah, this is so leading for the environment. The lesson is Google
it. We have tools for you.
We do. We can make this stop. Although I wouldn't have gotten the essay. So.
You wouldn't have gotten the essay, so maybe not Googling anything.
Don't Google it.
Scared to do anything that was. And so when you have these experiences, I mean, I have a really bad memory, so I would have to go home and just kind of scribble all the details. What's your process? Do you go and go, okay, I got to run home right now, and I have to write down as much as I can possibly remember?
I mean, it depends on the essay. So for an essay like the one we're talking about, definitely I was sort of taking notes as it was happening. Yeah. I mean, there's another essay in this book that's more of an interview format where I interview my uncle, who was there's no really good way to say this, a massive porn star in the 70s. He's
awesome.
He's great. And he got into pornography to find a girlfriend, which is what makes him sort of sweet and special. And so I interviewed Uncle Johnny, but I knew that's an example where I obviously knew I wasn't interviewing him for my health. Do you know what I mean? So I obviously knew it was for this. But a lot of the essays are years. I mean, they're a lifetime in the making, right? Because you're trying to sort of get at some larger point that's been brewing for a really long time. And so, I mean, the thing to remember about them is that they're not being assigned to me. Right. So if you asked me to write an essay about, what I wore yesterday, we'd be in trouble.
Fair enough. And from a journalistic standpoint, though, you do a lot of interviews. Are those generally assigned, or at this point, do you say, you know what, I want to interview my uncle, and maybe it's a better format for that than it is for my short story?
I mean, I am lucky in that I have. Oh, sorry, I interrupted.
No, how do you pick where it should live?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky that I have. It's like having multiple homes, right? It's like, does this go in the summer house? I don't know. I mean, this could be journalism. This could be for a novel. This could be for essays, and I do a little bit of screenwriting. It could be for that. But it's if you're talking, like, I just interviewed Laura Dern for Vanity Fair.
Awesome.
and it was wonderful. But that was assigned to me. I'm not deciding what goes on the cover of Vanity Fair. But yeah,
Not yet.
Not yet. But it depends. It's really not a good answer. I guess it depends.
Oh, that's a great answer, because it is. I think the point is you do live in so many different worlds, which is really cool, and the fact that so many of these things can translate to different places and find different audiences.
Well, it's also because sometimes you have to, even within the essays themselves. So there's like 16 essays in this book, and they're structured slightly different than the last 2 books, and the fact that they're sort of these like palate cleanser, tiny, 3-pagers between the massive essays. And they're there for a reason, because if I tried to make those stories or those points larger, it would like bloat and be a crappy essay.
And I love that, by the way, because sometimes you do need a palate cleanser. Sometimes because you finish a chapter and you go, oh, the next one's only a half a page. Like, what a little.
I like to give you a sense of accomplishment.
So nice, So I think varying the length is something we really appreciate.
Good.
Actually,
I'm glad.
Especially after you've come off a really long one. You need something.
You need something. A soft landing.
I think part of the reason people love you so much is that she's beloved, is that you have a talent for balancing humor with some more serious sorts of topics. It's a hard thing to do. I don't think people really understand how hard that is to do, because being consistent in voice. So do you ever go to these essays and think to yourself, okay, maybe I need to sort of balance it one way or the other, or how do you make sure that tone is reading consistently?
Oh, wow. I was about to be, I'm like, that's a good, very political, filibustering. I'm like, well, it's a good question. I'm so happy you asked it. Next. This is also going to sound a little bit like, oh, this old thing, but the difficulty is in making things less jokey.
Yeah.
It
is.
Yeah. The difficulty is in actually not in imbuing something with pathos or anything like that. I think that most, even though I'm not a stand-up comedian, I am a comic writer, you would call me, I guess. And I, most people of my ilk have some sort of dark, desperate sadness in their core.
Do you have that?
Sure.
That was my next question.
Like a therapy couch. It'll be great. I can just lie down. But, and so I think that the idea of seeing the sort of almost catastrophist version of any scenario is really comes quite naturally to me. I also do see things, in a sort of the way I talk about it is through a funny prism. But if it's too jokey, it can be a little cymbal bashing monkey. Yeah. And nobody likes it. We really do not like people to try too hard with humor. It upsets people. It does. It's oh, you're trying too hard. And I'm like, okay, well. And so it becomes distracting from the point of the essays. So if I have to balance, it's usually stripping jokes out.
Interesting. Do you ever go back and read some of the essays and it helps you sort of remember the experience? Is it sort of almost can it be like a diary, or is that therapeutic to go back and go, oh, that was my experience? I know 2 of the essays you read when you were here in 2008, one was Oregon Trail, and the other was finding out that your mother had been married before.
Yeah, really casually.
Really,
I was 16. I found an extra ring in her jewelry box. I was like,
I had a
what's
similar
this?
experience. So again, talking to the universality.
Really? Wow.
Things.
Okay.
But yes. So does that do you ever go back and it helps you sort of remember them? Because again, maybe some of these things are clearer in the moment, or the way that you put them, or do you go back and go, oh, well, maybe I've changed my perspective? What's that like to have this sort of collection?
The answer is it's not gonna be good. The answer is that it's the reverse. Because what happens is you, like anything, you don't have to be a writer for this, you get used to telling a version of a story. Yeah. And, if you've ever been a part of a family meal, I'm sure there's things get retold all the time, and you bring in someone new and they're like, wow, you really had a party in that time in high school, huh? Your parents are really still obsessed with that. It actually, it doesn't always do this, but it often will destroy the original memory. There's actually not a lot of tangential stuff I remember besides what I wrote after a while.
Really?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, we want to know.
But it's not even a bummer. It's just literally but that's why I'm careful with what I pick. And it's not because about exposure or what I'm willing to sacrifice to this or anything that noble. It's just that I don't mind, because I feel like when I wrote these essays, I really took my time with them, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna squeeze every angle I can out of this one experience. So I don't think there's like a massive amount of stuff I'm missing. Right. But every once in a while, I will forget, like there's a lot of stuff that happened in Ecuador that I like vaguely remember before and after throwing up on the glacier.
Were there essays in the book that took you a lot longer to complete than others?
Yeah, definitely. Well, also, technically, you know, they're essays about childhood. So if we want to start the firing gun there, they've taken me 30 years. Yeah. So I don't know how to. But then there's a pretty big one towards the end about the pressure for motherhood and fertility and, you know, freezing your eggs and should you have a kid and women judging other women, all those goodies. And that took a long time to sort of percolate because I want it to be, usually it's a topic that I feel like has been heavily tackled by other people, and I also have something to say, but I don't want to dwell on it, and I want to get in and get out. So the last essay in How Did You Get This Number, which is the second book, is like really one of the only books I've ever written about men and relationships in this incredibly concentrated way, because I thought, I don't write about this stuff, I'm just going to write the mother of all this kind of thing and get out. Ooh, that was loud, sorry.
Speaking of the fertility essay, what do you think of egg freezing becoming sort of part of this zeitgeist? And did you feel like that had been written about a lot and you wanted to bring your unique perspective, and then obviously having a first-person perspective? Like, what do you think about all of this now as it becomes more and more popular?
You know, I mean, I almost have no thoughts except for the fact that it's a good idea and you should do it if you want to do it. I wouldn't say it's like a cure-all. What happened to me, I had no intention of, you know, freezing my eggs became the locksmith pointing with the pen in a way, because all of the stuff had been swirling around in my head for a long time, but I didn't think I was going to write about it until I got a tremendous amount of them and broke like the hospital record. And that's lovely in some ways.
Broke the hospital record.
Yeah, and that I am a fish. But the issue is that I had all these like complications, and then what became interesting to me is how self-conscious I became, even now repeating it, you know, outside of the page, that it sounds like the worst, most obnoxious humble brag for people who are desperate to have children to say this, right? And go through the expense and the physical sort of commitment to do it. And that's when I really thought about writing the essay, because I was like, this is insane. It's arbitrary, it's math, I have no control over it, and yet I feel extremely judged for either what I do with this information. And so that was almost like an anger essay, you know? To be like, all right, everybody calm down.
Well, it's a really unique perspective, right? Because usually all...
And it's also really, medical stuff is so fun to write about.
Is it?
Oh my God. It's so fun to talk about. I don't know, I'm probably, you know, like if we were friends, I'd like come home and be like, look at this thing. What do you think it is? You know, and I find that stuff really interesting. I find interactions with doctors very interesting because they can be so flat, because they see... you know, if you go to a specialist, especially when there's an essay where I talk about having this weird inner ear disease, and he's so, this doctor's so unimpressed by like how I'm spinning and falling down and all this stuff, and I think, well, of course he's unimpressed. The last person who came in probably had like their nose in their pocket. You know, like there's such a strange. I just find them so interesting to write about. I find the whole medical stuff interesting.
In some ways, it's bittersweet when you have an ailment because...
Oh my God, then I get to see some weird doctor with like no social skills, and I can fillet him.
So you're a New Yorker. So that's exciting. So you talk a lot in the book about your experiences in New Yorker. I think we've talked a little bit about universality. What is it like to try to like bring that into your books, to always bring in like, you know, how you live, what living here is like, and trying to make that relatable? How does that process work for you?
I mean, maybe this is like, maybe I'm so far gone in like the sort of New Yorker solipsism thing, but I just don't feel like, I mean, that is like the one effortless thing about all this, because we live in a microcosm of the entire planet. Right. So like, there's also so much stuff. So it's that on one side, in the fact that like, it's not like I feel like it would be less relatable if I was in some sort of really sort of, you know, homogenous city. But then the other side of that is that I just feel like we tend to flatter ourselves into thinking that there's like, you know, the only in New York kids kind of thing. It's not true. People like have incredibly awkward interactions with their boss in Minneapolis. They hate their neighbors in Kansas City. It really
Not great everywhere
We're not
else.
like that special snowflakes, you know? It's just that there's a flurry. It's just that we're on top of each other so much. And so I'm not saying there's not something very special to New York. It's obviously permeates the entire collection, but like, it's so funny. I never think of myself as like a New York writer the way like,
Interesting.
let's say, I don't know, Joseph Mitchell was like a New York writer.
Sure.
You know?
Well, we're glad you're in the neighborhood.
Thanks. I am. I live very close to here.
So another chapter in the book, you were a guest star in Gossip Girl,
Yes.
which I watched. You say you weren't their first choice.
No.
Do you know who was
Yes.
their first choice?
Would you like to know?
You guys want to know?
Yeah, there's this essay where I just quit my job. I'm just setting it up a little bit, and they basically had they needed an author at a book party, at some sort of fancy book party, and their first choice was Fran Lebowitz. She was like, "I'm not doing this," and I took
But you.
Oh, I had no hesitation whatsoever.
Were you a fan of the show? Did you watch?
Not even really. I just thought it would be so fun.
And was it so fun?
It was so fun. Yeah, it was really fun. It was also but it was a strange, but again, that's a good example, though, of something that would be just a cocktail party story. Hey, this thing I did once, that's a pretty
Right.
good one, right?
Absolutely.
If it weren't for the fact that I had just quit my job in publishing to write full time, and I was playing a writer on the show, and everybody treated me, frankly, like I was Fran Lebowitz. And it was so strange because I wasn't comfortable. I think the first people I told who said, you know, oh, what do you do or what are you doing? The first people I said the words I'm a writer to were probably like Blake Lively. Because you're testing it out on a stranger almost. So that essay is really about identity because I was also playing myself.
Sure.
So it becomes this bizarre sort of Russian doll.
Did you have like a little bit of imposter syndrome where?
Yes. Well, also because I was in the line as I'm introduced in a way that no one at any book party would ever be introduced, where you know, an agent comes over to a group of the cast, and it's Chuck and his parents, and they say, "This is Sloane Crosley. She's the best-selling author of I Was Told There'd Be Cake." And like, I'm like, oh my God, how do I dispose of my own body? Like, that's no one would ever say that. And then I actually had to say a grammatically incorrect thing in response, which I am still in search of. And but I didn't want to correct them because I was a guest. So I said this thing, and then I ran off, and that was really the extent of my acting
Do you wish you would have corrected them now? Do
you know
wish
what's
you would've
funny
been like,
now knowing a little more, having worked a little more, you know, in Hollywood and knowing actors and knowing how fluid that is, really. Yeah, I do wish I, you know, corrected them. But
What else are you doing in Hollywood? You mentioned you're doing.
oh no, I have a couple pilots that are in the
exciting.
works. It is, but it's also like, you know, with a book you sign a contract, and you know,
Yes.
a book, it's like you can't be a little bit pregnant. A book comes out the other end, but you can be a little bit pregnant in Hollywood. So it's like Universal bought the rights to The Clasp, which is a novel I wrote, and I wrote the screenplay for that. And honestly, all of the stuff could lead nowhere, but it's fun, and frankly, it's lucrative, so it's nice.
That's always nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were rights for I Was Told There Would Be Cake.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I don't think anything's going to happen with it. That book came out forever ago. And then now it's also interesting. There's so much, you know, you sort of watch other things in other art forms sort of, I mean, not surpass it in like quality. I stand by the book, but like in theme, right? It's like, okay, we've heard of this kind of thing now. And so it's like a very pleasant on to the next experience.
So being at Google,
Yes.
one of the essays that I thought was most relevant, maybe you can guess which one it is.
Uh-oh.
That was.
Oh, yeah.
Was what do you think it is?
I think it's the domain name.
Yeah, that's right. So you had your domain name stolen on the. I mean, the web can be a very dark place.
Yes.
This is not Google's fault or anything involved.
No.
We're making the
These
world a
in no
better
way,
place.
This in no way reflects the opinion of
But you
Google.
went. You had your domain name basically held hostage.
Yes.
And you decided to go meet this person.
Yes.
And to hunt him down and to confront him.
My favorite dark alley.
Yes. Well, apparently you like dark alleys. You just told us about Mexico too. What did you learn from that experience? Like, do you think the laws should change? Like, what ended up happening? Where, like, this seems like such a bad thing that's happening to so many
Yeah.
people. How do we make this better?
There's almost no way.
There's no way.
Because what happens is if you let your domain name expire, which sort of happened to me. Well, this is embarrassing. Okay, so what happened is that I gave GoDaddy. Well, so let's start there. But that is, okay. They were my host or my registrar or whatever. And I mean, I started my website in like 2007, right? Mm-hmm. And so in 2007, my backup email address, so maybe this isn't totally horrible, was a Hotmail account. It was already on its way to like graveyard status then. And then what happened is when my domain name was going to expire, which I didn't realize, GoDaddy kept sort of knocking on the door of this abandoned house and saying, it's going to expire. We're warning you. But it didn't matter to me. I didn't live there. And so they're sending all these emails to Hotmail. I don't get them. All of a sudden, one day, my email stops working. And that's the other thing. My email is connected to it, which is why this happened. So basically, it turns out that someone has bought in the aftermarket, just like purgatory. It's like the afterlife. In the aftermarket, someone has bought at auction my website and has this algorithm that, to me seems kind of nasty because like he's not searching for traffic, which makes sense, but he's also searching for like the duration of ownership. Right. So like I look like what I am, which is someone who's like lost like the family heirloom back, right? So this guy does this for a living. His name is Wesley Perkins. I offered to change his name. He didn't want me to because he had a bit of
Really?
Oh yeah, I think he likes the attention. And so
until they change the laws, and then he's going to be like, the next.
Right. And so a magazine actually sent me, and I flew over. I was like, I took a screenshot, when he owned my information. I wrote him after I paid him a bunch of money to get it back, and I wrote him and I said, you might remember me from such instances as 5 seconds ago when I paid you a bunch of money. And I wanted to talk to him to figure out why he does this. And it was really interesting. It was like a really long conversation we had about morality, and it ended up being a really interesting essay to write, and one I definitely took notes on while it was happening.
Awesome. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the cover?
Yeah, the covers always are sort of tonal. Okay. Like I think there's something really graceful and beautiful and a little sad, but also a little funny about that bird, because I'm not sure if it's dead. It's probably dead. And it sort of dovetails, if you'll pardon the pun, with the title. And so that's really it. I mean, it's the same thing, and they're all like that. They're all a little weird. I was told Derby Cake has a dirty floral mattress on it. Like, there's no cake on the cover.
Which is what you asked for.
Kind of.
You were like, I want a dirty.
Yeah, I actually did ask them. It's funny. I am very happy with that cover. It's now become like really sort of connected to the title in a really great way because the book did well. But I remember asking them at the time. I'm like, can we mess it up? Like put some stains on it? Like I wanted it worse.
Because I think that's hard. It's hard because these essays, I mean, the clasp. It's very clear what the clasp is.
Yeah, that one's more obvious.
But when you have this essay collection, you're first of all trying to title your essay collection, right? Yeah. And then figure out what visually represents it. And the title here, too, like, how did you sort of...
Look, Alive Out There is, again, this, because I always try to avoid... in fact, I have successfully avoided titling any of them one of the essays in the book. I just always think with short stories and essays, it puts a strange amount of pressure on that one piece.
Right.
So, yeah, there is a piece in the book that I think is, like, the best piece.
There is?
Yeah.
Are you going to tell us which one you think it is?
Yeah, it's Outside Voices.
Outside Voices.
It's about my neighbors. I go crazy. That's the one I like the best. And not like cute. Oh, that's cute. Like really, like illegal crazy. Please buy the book.
Question.
Next.
Please.
Yes, please. Hi.
Hello. First of all, thanks for taking the time to come visit us. My question is, I was wondering, like, what is kind of your writing process, especially when you're working through cases where the essay is like not coming out the way you expect or planned? Like, how do you kind of work through that phase?
Well, thank you for thanking me. You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me. I think that I do skip around a little bit if I'm really stuck. I try not to do that in general. I'm not good at, like, I think for fiction more maybe, I'll write like, oh, okay, this chapter isn't working. I'm going to move on and start this other one and go back and, fix it. But essays are more, one train of thought. I mean, generally what I do is try to go in another door for the same topic. I just feel like I try to rewrite the beginning a little bit. And then if that doesn't work, I take a walk or a nap. I eat cheese. You know what I mean? Until you become unstuck. I mean, and if it's that stuck, then again, it's almost like the parking ticket conversation. Like if it's that stuck, there was an essay that was supposed to go into this book about I jumped off a cliff in Australia. I'm not really like that. I don't know why, but there was water. Yes, it's very important. But it just didn't. It just didn't seem that special to me. It just didn't seem that funny or entertaining. I don't know. It's really hard to actually tell you what the litmus test is. But like very few times do I just whole stop abandon something. It usually gets repurposed. But I'm not above doing that. But mostly I rewrite the beginning.
My question is, well, YouTube being what it is today, the way people are entertained has changed a lot. Podcasts, YouTube videos. Has your process changed on evaluating the measurement of how people are going to be entertained by your work? Has that changed over maybe the last 5-10 years?
Wow. Yeah, like am I sort of factoring in people's attention span?
Yeah, kind of.
I try not to. I'm sure I am though. I'm sure I am because I tweeted, and I've even made for the novel I made a book trailer with. It was a full trailer. Like Amanda Seyfried was in it. It was nuts, and her dog, and it had a whole premise, which is that the dog has read the book and she hasn't, and she's a bad book club member. I don't know. It's weird, but it was. But a friend of mine who directed it was like, no, we have to make it shorter. I'm like, it's like a minute and a half, and it's. I feel like I sort of straddle either consciously or even generationally some sort of line where I understand your question, I know that it's a problem, I know or that it's just different how people digest things, but I also tend to be super old-fashioned in my humor. I write about topics like egg freezing and I don't know, drugs, but I tend to approach it from kind of I have an older fan base, sometimes, so I tend to try to avoid putting things into sound bites, as is demonstrated by the length of my answer to your question. Thanks.
Coming from publishing, I have 2 questions. You can pick and choose maybe. But first, do you feel like you have a catbird seat of what you need to have happen in order for your book to be successful? And also just help, how do we fix publishing? Do you have ideas for this dying industry that is so important for the world right now?
Well, it's not. Okay, so I do have a catbird seat, but not when it comes to the most important part, which is creating the book, writing the book, doing anything that could be construed as art. That seat's dangerous to have anyway, even if I had it. You don't want to think about if this will be successful for a certain reason, or maybe you do. I don't know. It depends. If you're trying to follow some formula, it's funny. I did an interview with The Guardian. I remember a few years ago. It was more than a few years ago. It was 10, and they asked me if I was trying to identify a marketplace with essays, and I said no. If I was trying to identify a marketplace, I'd write about Abraham Lincoln or vampires. And this is before the book came out, and so I'm like, wow, I really messed up. It's the pull quote from that piece too. But your question about how do we fix publishing, I don't think it's that broken any more than the record industry is broken or any other industry is broken. There are wonky things that shouldn't work that do work. It's how bees aren't supposed to fly. They're not genetically physically, their bodies are too big for their wings. They shouldn't be able to fly, but they do. And similarly, for some reason, it makes sense to send an author on book tour. Independent bookstores are doing extremely well right now. Online is sort of a different problem. But I don't know. It's really hard. When I first worked in book publishing, I had this rather sort of naive maybe idea that I was it's so great because I know so many people who are incredibly intelligent, but they work in other industries and they don't read, and I'm going to get them to read. And then I realized how hard it is to get people who do read to read. It's impossible to just get them to buy the books. So I don't know really what the answer is, except for to continue to support the few literary breakout books that happen that aren't just crap, and just hope that people think to themselves there's more where that came from. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. When you're writing nonfiction, to what extent do you like tell like the stripped down raw story and or like embellish it kind of like to like for the aspect of like the storytelling?
I mean, I sort of lean towards hyperbole and towards analogy. So obviously, the first essay in this book, I'm waiting on a street corner for a cab, and there's a woman in a wheelchair and a guy standing next to her. And of course, this cab comes with like the sliding doors, and I'm like, okay, even though I was here first, I'm like, you guys obviously take it. And they're like, thanks so much. And the guy like leans down the wheelchair and kisses the woman and hops in the cab, and then she wheels off. And I'm like, holy shit. Sorry. And I said, I have a line where I say, obviously, this is the worst person to have ever lived. Probably not. I mean, number 8, maybe. But I just feel like, I guess, so in that sense, very much so, it's my style, right? But in terms of telling the truth, I am really close to the hole, which is a golf term I don't own. But I get as close as I possibly can, because I feel like I don't know why people are doing this otherwise. And I'm not trying to completely sort of abstractly shading a lot of people right now. But this is the truth of what happened. And if it's only for technical reasons, that things tend to get shifted. So the essay I said I really liked about my neighbors who were these sort of hellions, that's probably the biggest lie in the book, because that essay is in the past tense and I still live in that apartment. But they graduated and they did not go to NYU, I don't think. But the point is that I do it because I feel like when I have to, there's embellishments in that way. But otherwise, it's pretty close to what happened.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any last questions? I have a few. Oh, we have one.
I was just wondering if I understood right. You said you were adapting the class for television and whatnot. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the kind of screenwriting and about adapting your kind of own work for that different medium.
So basically, it's for film, and it's weird because at first it's unpleasant, because obviously these came out as essays for a reason. Like, I don't write poetry, I don't write songs. You wouldn't want to see them. And so at first it felt kind of weird, like, haven't I already done this? And I'm like, not a great actress. I'm like, I already delivered it once, I can't just do it again, And then what happened was I got to restructure and honestly fix everything that I felt was wrong in the novel. So if for that reason only, I kind of hope it gets made one day, just because it's like an apology to myself for not fixing that to begin with.
You mentioned somewhere that you want people, when they're reading your book, to feel like they'd found their other old man Muppet.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Still what are their names? This is horrible that I don't know their name. Something is Statler
and Waldorf.
I love this crowd. Yeah, Statler and Waldorf.
Is that, so that's how you, what were you saying? Tell us what you...
Oh, well, that's stuck in the middle with you feeling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, is you want to read essays, especially if they're personal or they're narrative, and connect to them and think, not necessarily that you want to curl up with the author, but that you're facing the same direction. You've got the bar seats, not the table, where you're just sort of facing the same direction. And then, that feeling you have with someone, whether it's a friend or, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, partner, where you meet eyes across a table when someone said something ridiculous at a large dinner and you almost can't look at them because you'll lose it. And that's the goal for the essays.
So does that make, so people who read your book probably feel like they're already your friend. They already, you said before, people know so much about you, and it's an uneven playing field.
It is an uneven playing field, yeah.
That is part of your charm, right? Is that people think, oh, we're friends. I read all of our books. I know all of these things.
It does happen like that, I will say, since we're sort of wrapping up. Yeah. There's another version of that, which is I was once on the subway. So I'll end with a New York story. I have a prop. This is so good. I was on the subway, and this woman was reading my second book, and she was sitting directly across from me, and not on an e-reader, so I could actually see what she's reading. E-readers have spoiled half the spying in New York. I'm judging, but she was doing this, and she seemed totally just really ensorcelled by the language. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, do I say anything? What do I do? And she does one of these, and she goes, like the check of the binding to see how much longer she has to slug through it. And I was like, then I felt really like, this is going to be really awkward if she recognizes me and wants to talk to me about it.
So you scurried away.
So I scurried away. It was that or Tripper. I scurried away.
And my last question is, what's next? I mean, you're very prolific. You're doing a lot of things, but and it takes a lot of time, obviously. Probably your next essay collection we won't see for a while because you have to build up these stories.
Yes.
Right?
True.
So read this one and read it slowly. No. But what's next? What can we expect to see from you?
Probably a novel if it ever gets done. Okay. But honestly, at the rate the novel's going, maybe the essays.
So
a book. It's not going to be like a diorama that I come up, or a puppet show. Like, it'll definitely be a book.
It'll be a book.
Oh yeah,
a book, guys.
It'll front to back, bound. Little price.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
And thank you for your questions.
Please go out, buy and read Look Alive out there. It's great. And let's thank Sloane one more time for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so nice.